Heat and DSM-5. Schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. Last time we took up this chapter in general, and there were questions on how to be more specific. So today, in response to that suggestion and demand, I'll take up one disorder from the chapter and go more specific on how to apply the heat model to DSM-5. So let us go into this chapter. This is second chapter of part 2 of DSM-5, schizophrenia and psychotic disorders. And from this chapter, I have chosen delusion to make easy to understand the application of heat model to DSM-5. So what I have done is to make the teaching easy. That's a difficulty because given the confidentiality concerns, I can't take up any case. On YouTube, I can't put any case analysis. So what I have done is I have created a fictitious character, a monk who lives in Las Vegas. And this monk, this character, will have all the disorders of DSM-5. So I will create a small case situation, hypothetical, for the purpose of explanation. So let me just read out this hypothetical case situation I have created. In reality, there is no such monk living anywhere. So let us go into this hypothetical case and then we can start the discussion. Monk in Las Vegas reported a delusion. The delusion was that in the largest casino at Las Vegas, there is a team of experts, expert thought extractors, who are reading his mind and extracting thoughts out of his mind. They do so because they believe there is some great destiny the monk has, and they don't want him to realize that destiny. Also, there is some magical spiritual golden entity inside the mind of the monk, which this team of experts wish to snatch from him, extract from him, and rob him. This is the delusion of the monk living in Las Vegas. If this is the kind of delusion that we come across, to this case then, of course it's a hypothetical case, to this case then, this hypothetical case, how do you apply the heat model? Let's go in. We have had 2 lectures on heat model, so slightly I will pick up slowly the pace and take for granted that the basics are already in place. Following the heat model, the first step in the heat model is case history, like any other method. So let us look at the story of his suffering. What is the story of the symptoms? The first thing we will do is to take the story of the suffering. What I have given actually is only the complaint. I have not given the life story of the monk. So we will take the life story of the monk. And the life story of the monk, because every symptom has a story, and this story is a sub-story of the larger story of life. And the sub-story emerges from the matrix of the larger story of life. So first we'll look at the story of the suffering. We will then take a look if the monk is practicing any energy healing practices or any mystical practices, and if it has helped him in some way or not helped him in some way. So we'll take details from the monk of the energy healing practices if he is doing or any mystical practices he is doing. Often there can be a difficulty in the way these practices are done, and that may create trouble. But we can say something on that if we know the area that we are referring to. We'll also take the history in terms of spiritual life of the monk, his belief in reincarnation, his karma, his goal of life. What are his own reflections on these areas? Does he believe that the difficulty he has something to do with the past reincarnation? What is the story of it if he believes in that? Does he believe it is out of karma? Does he believe the suffering is because his soul wanted to experience this suffering? That this suffering is one of the goals of life into itself, not of the surface personality, but some part of the personality in depth, which did not necessarily be pathological if we look from a standpoint of the universe. From a social standpoint, of course, it's pathological. We write down a collection of dreams from the monk, and we write down the first observation report of the monk. That when you meet the monk for the first time, what are your observations about this monk? How does he appear? Masculine, feminine, dominating, submissive, cheerful, gloomy, truthful, liar, genuinely spiritual, hypocritical. How does he appear? And what feelings and thoughts and visuals come to you in his presence? Your response is very important. So this will be the case history of the monk. And of course, given the difficulty, we will go for Rosha, and we'll also try to use pranic healing. Pranic healing will tell us, like in yes and no terms, which body is affected or not affected. Is reincarnation an issue or not? Is karma an issue or not? Is goal of life an issue or not? Because there is no empirical test to find out anything true or false about these areas. It is the believability of story. It is your intuition, and maybe you have some mystical insights, or you use something like pranic healing to confirm or rule out something. Now, can pranic healing go wrong? Of course, it can go wrong. Anything can go wrong. But does it always go wrong? No. Does it give results more than 50% of the times? Yes, it does. So we'll put both of these to use. Then we'll take a look at the 7 elements of the heat model, starting from event causation, ending with elemental analysis. Let us look at it one by one. First, the problem is of delusion, and delusion, a psychopathology, is an event occurring in the mind. And if we look at causality of this event, in a generic sense, this is an event like any other event. So if we look at event causation in general, in a philosophical sense, we have this generic causality factors. So let us look at what can be at work for this delusion. Can journey of the self be at work? It can be. How do we check out? By talking to the person, by getting input from somebody who knows mysticism, use of pranic healing, our own intuition. Let us say this does not come to be true, then we remove this part. In most cases, this will not be true. Journey of the universe, that would be true, but that's not something that we factor in psychopathology at that micro level. Karma of the self, yes. Karma of others, no. Karma created by the principle, no. Free will of the self, free will of others, no. Chance, no. Freedom of reality. So we are left with three elements from the general event causality model which can lead to delusion. So this delusion can have a karmic root of past incarnations. It can have possession by beings or suprahuman forces at work. So suprahuman forces or beings may be at work, or it may just be laws of nature as we study in psychology. So these two are areas of mysticism and spirituality. This is pure science. In classical psychoanalytic approach, we will take only this. We will not take 1 and 2. But in the heat approach, we take in 1, 2, and 3. So all the three can be at work. Any of them can be at work. It may be two of them in some proportion. We don't know what is the proportion. We can find out again by intuition, pranic healing, talking to the person, or we can have a provisional estimate and wait for a confirmatory reflection as we go along. Is usually karma at work? Yes, with this kind of difficulty, more often than not, the karmic problems are there. Can suprahuman forces and beings be involved? There are two aspects to it. One aspect is it's, of course, both are beliefs. Karma also is the set of belief, and suprahuman forces and beings also are in the realm of belief. For some, it can be subjective truth. For most, it's a belief, but by any rate, it is not an objective truth as yet. So we have to be careful that we don't go back to the dark ages in our quest to be holistic and open. So with abundant caution, we move into this delicate area. It is like walking on the razor's edge, but we take that risk for a good purpose. Often in chronic or very difficult psychopathology, the karmic load is involved. Suprahuman forces at times can be involved in a causal way. At times they come after the pathology starts, in the sense that they become more of, their presence is more of consequence of the pathology rather than its cause. And laws of nature, of course, are at work, which we study in psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, psychology in general, including Hindu psychology. After passing through the okay. So we make a provisional estimate here for the monk. What seems to be at work? Let us say the reflection, a holistic reflection, brings us to the element of karma and suprahuman forces and beings consequently coming in, not causally coming in. And because of the karma, the karma propels certain events and thereafter the laws of nature take. So we will find that, let us say, there was an early life object loss, very, very early life object loss. And once that event happened, then the laws of nature take over. Because there is an object loss, there is no internalization of the good object, there is no internalization of a stable, soothing object. The split remains open, and then the Oedipus goes into a problem, and self is not created, and we see all the psychopathological difficulties coming. So once this event happens because of karma, then the laws of nature take over and lead to psychopathology, severe, in this case, delusion. And once the delusion happens, these entities come in to take advantage of that delusion. And this is the provisional understanding. Then we go to the next one. In terms of the bodies, how do we see the pathology being located? There can be various opinions. Some may look at it purely as a neurochemistry issue, in which case the roots will be in the physical body. Psychiatry will have this approach. Let us say in our approach, in our situation, we don't find this to be the sole causality. We see this as one factor, but we see that the core is in the karmic body. So we see the core here, that from here the pathology starts, and then it has presence in every body. If we know that from the case history that we don't have much of a sexual dynamic here, we can remove this part. Rest of the bodies will be important. If you feel, you can remove this part also. So these are the bodies where the foundation is in the karmic body. Second important foundation is in the emotional body. Third in the thought body. Then in the physical body perhaps, and then in the energy. So this allows us to see what all can be used, what our tools are available, and this can be a comprehensive list from which we have to find out what to apply for this particular person. And one can always go in details as to in each body what is happening. In the energy body, is any chakra overblocked? If it's depleted, what is the chakra strength? And then we can also go into elementals in terms of the emotional and thought elementals, which are a part of heat. Heat elementals which are emotional in nature, heat elementals which are thought based or epistemological in nature. Once we are clear about the general causality, about the bodies in which the pathology is rooted and spread out in terms of its tentacles, we then come to the school explanation and of the pathology. Let us say in this situation, we don't see anything severely sexual. Freudian school goes, this sorry, this goes. So these are important elements which remain to understand the psychopathology. That perhaps it appears from the case that there is a severely deeply rooted very early life Kleinian issue. There has been an absence of, let's say, good enough mothering. There is a problem of creation of the self. From a tantra psychology standpoint, we know certain chakras are functioning well, certain are not functioning well. Similarly, from Sri Aurobindo's model of the mind, also we can conceptualize which planes and which parts of the big rather are involved in the pathology. And from the heat point of view also, we can look at the pathology in terms of how the mind is functioning in this psychopathological context. Is it coming through the collective unconscious? Is it just from the personal unconscious? Is it coming from the open spaces in the collective or the personal unconscious? How is it coming? Where it is coming from? How is the delusion created in the first place? So we can look at it from that point of view. Then try to correlate the part of unconscious that we are referring to which chakra is it related to. From a heat standpoint, we also go into the elementals. Which elementals can be at work? Subsequently, we'll take up the study of elementals very soon, in a few moments. So based upon this analysis, we come to a general evaluation. What would have caused this thought extraction delusion? There is an element of robbery internalized deeply. Looks like the very early life desire to rob the good breast of all its goodness, that is projected out and it comes back in terms of robbing all the goodness which is in the mind of the monk. So the monk believes the best part of him is the mind and somebody is robbing the mind. So the early childhood desire to rob the good breast is projected out that comes back in the form of a delusion. And the robbers are the bad objects. There can also be an early life fantasy of the mother as the robber, who would be attacked and thrown into pieces, and now those pieces come up as this group of people. If the case history tells us this is the likely situation, then we are primarily in a Kleinian situation. We can use Winnicottian techniques for therapy, but for causality point of view, practically it's not required. Then we take a look at the defenses which are used by the person. The defenses are primarily of denial and projection. Ego strength, it depends how we see the person, how is he otherwise in life. We may be in a situation of a completely disintegrating ego, or we may be in the situation of a strong ego which projects out. Ego strong enough not to disintegrate, but not strong enough to successfully repress. The capacity to bear affect, that also varies because it's a relative term. The capacity is relative to the affect generated. If affect generated is high, let's say very high, even if there is capacity, you would still have excess affect to be projected on. And if the affect generated is low, and even if the capacity is moderate, you would still be able to successfully deal with the affect. So capacity to bear affect relative to the affect generation. The socio-economic reality situation which can easily cause everyday disintegration of the self, everyday injury to the ego. So once we have all this, first part of holistic evaluation, and then a very important part of it, the surreal. So in the holistic school evaluation, we essentially also go into a surreal analysis of the pathology, how it is operating, how is the delusion operating. And surreal is a very important element of it. The surreal you can divide into very different kinds of categories of surreal. The artistic surreal, the fantasy surreal, the everyday surreal, the epistemological surreal, and the elemental surreal. Each becomes more and more subtle and less easy to recognize and understand as we go from 1 to 5. I should put it as 1 to 5. The artistic surreal is what is expressed in artistic and creative terms. We don't know if this monk expresses in artistic and surreal creative terms. If this avenue is open, usually the intensity of these projections are less. The fantasy surreal, which comes up in dreams and in day fantasies, depends on what the monk tells us. We try to understand how the surreal aspect of the mind is at play in the artistic surreal and the fantasy surreal. And is it the same way, or is there a difference between the two? From a psychoanalytic standpoint, of course. We are not looking at it from, when we look at a comparative thing, we don't look at from a linguistic standpoint or from a graphic standpoint. The everyday surreal, how does he dress up? How does he maintain his house? How is the surreal involved there? The epistemological surreal, that goes into the evaluation that is behind, causally behind the delusion. If we look at the delusion, how does the person start the delusion? If we know a particular situation, we saw X and this delusion started. So there was a stimulus X and it was sensed in a particular way, perceived in a particular way, conceptualized into a delusion. So how do we look at the epistemological process of this surreal phenomena? And we look at the elemental surreal, that when the elements come into play, even in general, not only in pathology, how do they invite the surreal to be a part, to be partners with them as they move into psychic activity? So let us look at the epistemological part. Other parts are very conventional. Let us say this person sees a movie poster of a group of army men and the delusion starts. So that then becomes a stimulus. Let us say he is looking at the poster from 5 feet and all the stimuli come into him and they're coordinated together in terms of a sensation. And then he perceives that to be a poster. And then he understands that to be a poster of a group of army men. And then by association, the unconscious traumatic fantasy, the delusion is activated. And he believes that this delusion is true. And he, of course, never goes to wisdom. If he does not have insight, even knowledge will not happen. This will be the epistemological process or truncated epistemological process. And this is what Bion says, that for Bion, psychosis essentially is a epistemological crisis. It's not so much of a affective crisis. This is very different from most people who believe essentially all psychopathology is essentially a crisis of blocked affect. Coming to the epistemological elementals, certain things we can remove in practically every pathology. This we can remove. How are the epistemological elementals involved? What is cognitively out of place? What is epistemologically out of place? When this process of looking at the poster happens, and suddenly the delusion starts. In that story of the delusion, what is out of place? In the starting of the delusion, what is out of place? In general, what is out of place? Does the person have a clear sense of space? If yes, we don't have to think about it, so this goes. Does the person have a clear sense of time? If yes, this goes. Do we see certain archetypal elements? If yes, then we keep it, or this goes. This also can go. So these are the epistemological elementals that are essentially in difficulty. And we mark here what is the level of difficulty, low, average, or high. And this allows us to focus in therapy on this aspect of the elemental in the free association analysis that we do. So whenever we discuss the free association, where to move into the analysis of free association, if we have it in the back of the mind, we can direct our interventions in that direction to address those very elementals which are off track in the epistemological process. In case of the monk, if we draw a force field of health and non-health forces, obviously the non-health forces have won. We can remove this question also. What is the purpose of the pathology? This requires data from the case history. This can be applied to any particular event, either just the delusion itself or any event where the delusion starts or ends. This can also be applied to the way he thinks in general when he narrates any incident. So this allows us to find out which epistemological element is off track and then address it in therapy. Also in self-work. This also is very interesting for giving self-work. How do you give self-work? You try to address what is off track. And this is a way to know what is off track. We then come to the essential affect system in heat. So we look at the epistemological side, the cognitive side, and the affective side to find which elements are off track and then to address them in therapy and self-work. So for this monk, is it the strength of the stimulus? No. Is it the biological clock? No. Psychological clock? No. Is it other factors? We don't know. Let us say we are convinced nothing else is at work. So these three are the causes for generating effect, huge amount of effect. Desire strength usually will be very high. Evaluation system will be extremely sensitive, very high. sensitivity will be very high, affinity will be very high, free life energy very high, and in general life energy may be high, may not be high. Let us say we remove this. Affect expressed usually will be low. Sublimated here it's very low. These are important affect parameters. Will be low, moderate, high, very high, high. We then come to the we come then to elementals, the deepest part of neat model. And as we know, there are 8 types of elementals that we have discussed out. Let us go into them one by one. In this delusion, you can remove psychic. You can remove so these are the elements at work in terms of the elementals. In terms of motivational elementals, we should be clear here what is primary and what is derivative. What are the causes and what are the consequences? Because some of the variables from here will be in the causal side and some of them will be in the consequence side. We remove those elementals which are not the causal motivational elementals for the delusion. So these are some of the elementals at work, and we'll have to find out from the case which of these are primary, which are derivative. In terms of process elementals, what is at work? All these elementals will be at work. It's very difficult to remove anything from the process elements because they are generic to all pathology. Faculty knowledge, of course, knowledge is present here by its absence. It's very important variable, but we are dealing with a Bjornian situation of minus k. These 3 elements also are very important, always relevant. And of course, there is a continuum, hope to no hope, positivity to negativity, cheerfulness to gloom. Resultant elementals. You can remove what is not relevant. Rest of them have to be explored. These also are universal, very difficult to remove anything. So process elementals, resultant elementals, characteristic elementals, faculty elementals, almost universal in all pathology. Freedom elementals. Healing plan. I don't think this requires much of elaboration. We have done it in the last lecture. We'll go into details of this psychotherapy. We know the phases of big therapy. First is safety and expression. This is self-explanatory. It's true for practically all therapies. The only new thing is the elemental work on elementals, which is a unique heat element that we find out in terms of elementals. What is off track and we address it. And we also take a look at the epistemological process and the affective system process and set them right. Bring them into discussion and set them right. So in one sense, there are 5 elements which are unique to heat. First, the holistic approach to causality and healing. Second, understanding the epistemological process in an elemental sense. Third, understanding the essential affective process. Fourth, understanding epistemological and affective elementals which are off track. And fifth, addressing these off track elements in self-therapy and self-work. And after adequate work is done with the monk and the person has fairly good insight, largely healed of the cognitive difficulties, we can then look at affect release through any of this. Because he is a monk, spiritual mystical practices also can be offered if he is interested. And then as usual, healing consolidation, goal setting, living the goal, consolidating the new normal, termination of therapy, and moving to living. Thank you.